This entitled aunt thinks she can live at her relative's house rent-free forever. Watch and see this family's reaction as she tries to justify why she deserves to live there at no cost. Happy birthday, today's your birthday, and on with the revamped show. My husband and I own a 3-bedroom house. We don't need all the space, so we rent out one of the rooms in our home. We charge a base fee for rent, and then split utilities and food 3 ways. We buy all the groceries, and it gets tracked on the rent each month. This was easier for all parties, as we would generally just cook meals together, and didn't want to worry about who bought what. It worked for us for 5 years, with no issues and 2 different renters. The current roommate, CB, has lived with us for 2.5 years. He is my husband's best friend, and has known him for 10 years. He was even the best man at our wedding last year. All around, he's a stand-up guy, or so we thought. Lately, we have lost a lot of respect for him, and unfortunately, might be ending our relationship. The choosing beggar lost his job in December. He works in the trades, and the project he was on wrapped up. Nothing unexpected. When the project was close to done, he should have been prepping for the layoff, but didn't. He told us not to worry. He was going to take December off and start looking for a new position in January. He said that not a lot of places hire right before the holiday. He also made sure to mention that rent wouldn't be an issue, as he had enough to cover up to the end of January. We always charged him rent at the end of the month, because when he moved in, he had some debt to pay off, and it helped him by delaying the rent 30 days. And really, it didn't make much difference to us. Well, end of December comes around, and he doesn't have the money. My husband and I discuss it, and we decide we'll float him for a month or 2 until he gets back on his feet. He's a good friend of ours, and everyone can use a little help when they fall on hard times. Although I was a little annoyed that he said he'd have the money for rent saved and then didn't. End of January comes around and he still has no job and no rent. Because we split the cost of groceries, we are effectively paying for him to live with us for free and providing free meals. I'm getting more frustrated as each day goes by and he doesn't have a job, but I also understand that it can be hard if you're applying and not getting a call back. I discuss with my husband and he says we should give him more time. Now, to add to all of this, I am currently 34 weeks pregnant. We didn't need a renter to pay our bills, but we thought it would help us if we could collect rent from someone and aggressively pay down our debt to pay for our wedding last year and anything remaining before the baby comes. However, my pregnancy has been a terrible one, and I have been off work intermittently for the last 8 months due to mobility and pain issues. As a result, my pay has been sporadic and much lower than what I would normally collect, which would have been fine because our renter gave us the breathing room we needed in the event something happened. Except we are not getting rent. In January, I was put on 3 weeks bed rest, meaning 3 weeks of reduced pay, which I wouldn't receive for over a month, as I had to wait for the short-term disability to be approved. So we are living off just my husband's paycheck, and he is supporting me and CB since he is not contributing to the bills. I ended up going back to work in February, but then had to take another 5 days off due to medical issues. This was all unpaid as I had no sick days left, and it was too short a time frame to get disability. My doctor has now put me on early maternity leave, even though I am not due for another 6 weeks. I'm feeling better now that I have the time to take care of myself and my baby, but I've been told it can take 6 to 8 weeks before I start receiving maternity pay. So again, we are surviving off just my husband's pay, which we can live off, by the way. It just means we have to be very tight with what we spend our money on. As a result, we have cut our grocery bill from $800 a month to $250 a month, with the intention of eating a lot of rice, beans, potatoes, etc. And we get some meat from my uncle's farm for free whenever he is in town. Back to the choosing beggar. In February, I started calling around to family to see if they knew of anyone hiring. My aunt actually knew of 2 positions open that CB could apply for. Once with her company, which she said was a guaranteed hire as long as he mentioned her name, and one with my cousin's employer, who would guarantee an interview since it was a referral. I gave both to the choosing beggar, with hopes he would start working. He didn't end up applying to either of them. We had a few friends over at the beginning of March, and choosing beggar was talking to them, and they were discussing his unemployment. He mentioned that it was hard on him because he had applied to 20 places and only got 2 callbacks. I hear this, and all I can think of is, you have only applied to 20 places and you have been out of work since December? Last week was the last straw for me. On Tuesday, he asked me what we wanted to have for dinner. I said I would like fried rice. It's cheap, quick, and easy to make. He then starts making comments about how he is tired of eating rice. I offer potatoes and frozen vegetables. He said it was too bland. This went on for a few minutes until I end the conversation, saying we cannot afford anything better, so he can pick one of my suggestions or get his own food. My mobility issues from my pregnancy are so bad I can't clean the house. I can't even get dressed in the morning without my husband's help because I can't bend over, and I also can't lift my legs. I also have developed severe carpal tunnel in both my hands, so I have trouble gripping things. Pregnancy is so great, guys. So my husband has been doing his best to keep the house clean, most notably the kitchen. Since CB is home all day, he makes a fair amount of dishes that get left around. Originally, we had the arrangement that he would cook dinner and we would clean the kitchen. But now that he's not working, it piles up a lot faster than my husband can keep up with. So there are days we have no clean dishes or there is no counter space to cook on. Last week, Choosing Beggar made a comment to me while I was in the kitchen and he was annoyed we never had clean dishes anymore. But he didn't make any offer to clean the dishes. Instead, he pulled out a paper plate that we use for barbecues and used that instead. Later that day, when he went to cook something for dinner, he then made a comment that there was no room to cook since the kitchen was such a mess. Again, instead of cleaning it, he moved the dirty dishes off the stove and onto the table, and then proceeded to cook. He had a job interview last week. I asked him how it went after he got home, and he said, "It went well. I liked the place enough and I might even take the job if they offered me minimum wage." And the first thought through my mind was, have you been turning down jobs that are only offering minimum wage? Our minimum wage is $15 an hour. All throughout this, my husband and I have offered to pay his phone bill. He can't get an interview without a phone. We have had to buy a battery for his truck when his died so he could go on an interview. And we've lent him our car for interviews when he ran out of gas in his vehicle. I am livid at how this turned out. We thought we were being good people by helping out a friend who was down on his luck, and all he does is sit at home all day and make comments about how we are not providing enough. My husband and I are going to be serving him with an official eviction notice at the end of the month. We didn't want to because we know he has nowhere to go, no family to move in with and no money to go anywhere else. Just sucks because he was a good friend for a long time, and I don't think the friendship can recover from this. Communal sharing of any sort just sucks. I know that they were happy at first to do the whole, they'll all buy the groceries together and make dinner together. And if that works for them, that's fine. But for me, I like things to be fair. I'll buy the things that I want, you buy the things that you want. I hate when I'm going on holidays with people and everyone's like, let's make it simple. We'll just do one big shop together and then we'll split the bill however many ways. Except everyone wants to buy the things that they want, and of course because the bill's gonna be split evenly, they don't really care about how much it costs. The people who suggest to do shopping this way are always the ones who want to spend the most and make you pay for it. It's in human nature to do as little work as possible and get as much reward as you can. So unfortunately, this housemate was completely incentivized to do zero work and live for free at others' expense. Why do you think people get so upset with politics when you say you don't like a particular politician? Because that politician's promising them free stuff by stealing it from you. And yet somehow you are the selfish one for wanting to keep your own stuff. Now, because all the parking spots were under the building, I used to park outside on the street to wash my car. I'm that guy with a bucket of car care stuff you see on weekends, festooning a vehicle that has absolutely nothing special about it, with way too much love. So there I am, in the oldest, rattiest home clothes I own, scrubbing my wheels and rubbing wax into paint, when my neighbor, let's call him Jerry, pulls up. Now to paint a picture, Jerry is 70 and bent over like 30 degrees at the hips due to old age and a work injury 20 years ago. He walks with a cane but is very independent, with the exception of a home help nurse that visits a couple times a week, Jerry gets out of his car and shuffles over to compliment my work. He laments that he has to take his car to the auto washer these days, and those gosh darned machines just don't do his baby justice. Jerry's baby is an early 2000s Camry. We commiserate our love of mediocre mass-produced vehicles, and I offer to wash Jerry's car for him. Jerry's eyes light up and he's genuinely thankful. He says he can't let me do it for free, so he hobbles back to his car and drives off, returning a short while later with 2 6-packs of beer. Jerry and I drink a beer each and chat while I finish my own car and move on to his. It was a good afternoon of stories and beers, so I didn't mind much in the slightest. When I was finished, Jerry pushed the second 6-pack into my hands and tells me I do good work. He might even hire me again in the future. This whole process is ongoing for a couple of months. I wash, Jerry talks, and we just sort of hang out. At the end, there is always a 6-pack for my hard work, but evil was stirring in the background, for our happy car washing experience had been noted by a choosing beggar. The next time Jerry and I set up, Jerry by now has a lawn chair and mini cooler for the occasion. I'm mid-wash when Choosing Beggar pulls up behind Jerry in her filthy minivan. Choosing Beggar and the kids get out, and Choosing Beggar says something like, "I'll be back in a little while." Now naive me thinks she's talking about having trapped Jerry's Camry between my car and hers. Nope. Anyhow, Jerry and I finish up. I help him pack his stuff up and the cars go back into the parking garage. I'm minding my own business inside when there is a knock at the door. It's Choosing Beggar and this week's boyfriend. Choosing Beggar is livid. "You cleaned the old man's car. Why haven't you cleaned mine?" I'm confused, but I tell the dynamic duo that I didn't know I was supposed to clean her car. I only wash my own car and Jerry pays me in beer to help him with his. I don't owe either of them anything. And if they're so concerned about it, maybe they should clean their own vehicle? To his credit, the boyfriend just looks confused by the whole thing, and is shuffling awkwardly. But Choosing Beggar doubles down. She's a single mother, and she left the keys in the car to make my job easier. What if someone had stolen her precious vehicle? It would have been my fault. At this point, I'm done with this stupid conversation, and some other stuff Choosing Beggar has pulled is fresh in my mind, so I tell them to pound sand. It's a free street. If they want their stuff washed, they can do it themselves. Otherwise, quit bothering me with their BS. Our next car wash session, and a couple weeks later, the boyfriend, wow, this guy actually has staying power, shows up with a 6-pack of cheap beer and tells me to do the van first because they need it later. Jerry and I laugh at him. I chuck him an old sponge and tell him he better get started if he wants it done quickly. The boyfriend sort of shuffles around while his brain computes. It must have got hot in his head because he drank one of the beers to cool down, then tells me to frick myself. He can do it better anyways, drinks another beer and goes inside. Jerry and I have another laugh and finish up for the day when a cop car rolls down the street. Now my city has an ordinance against drinking on the street, so yes, Jerry and I were in the wrong here, but the street is very quiet, and before this I have never seen a cop car just cruise by. 2 cops approach us and say they have a complaint about 2 men drinking heavily and abusing passers-by and people in their apartment complexes. I'm about to explain when Jerry looks the cops in the eye and says, "You caught me, officer." The cops share a look, but Jerry just keeps going. "I've been out here drinking, watching this fella wash cars. I don't think I've drunk enough to abuse people and forget about it. But you caught me fair and square. Best take me away." He holds his hands out so they can slap the cuffs on and finishes with, "You might have to help me up. Can't stand without my cane." The cops are just sort of sharing a look like they don't know how to proceed with this confession. They look at the 3 empties neatly arranged on the lid of the cooler, shrug and tell Jerry to put his hands down. We get a verbal warning about drinking in the street and told to enjoy our day. The boyfriend was later picked up by different cops on an outstanding warrant after an anonymous tip pointed out his new unlisted residence to the relevant authorities. Turns out he wasn't the one after all. Jerry and I switched to cokes, and the car washes continue until I moved out a year later. There's always that boyfriend that does the bidding of a choosing beggar. It's like he's lost all sense of autonomy and independent thought. The frustrating thing is you can't reason with people like that. They've got their loyalties and they'll defend it, no matter how ridiculous the requests of their choosing beggar girlfriend are. Okay, so a bit of backstory. My family is, for a lack of a better term, well off. We own a few local pubs, we have very good jobs, etc. all aside from one of my aunt, the choosing beggar. She had chosen not to go for extra education because she was convinced that she would still have everything paid for her. Let's just say that didn't happen. After realizing this, she started to live in place to place with my family. Now to the story. So recently my parents decided to have an extension on the house as well as a pool house at the back of the property. Now it was nothing big, but my parents said if I pay decent rent, then I can live there. Of course I said yes, and all the construction started happening. It was all great, till one day, we got a knock on the door.
Oh, hi, sweetheart. I heard you were having construction, and I wanted to talk to your parents about it.
I moved aside and let her into our kitchen. Oh, hi, CB. How are you?
Great, actually. I'm looking for somewhere to live, actually.
That's great. Have you found anywhere yet? At this point, I had tuned out of the conversation, as to not be nosy, until I heard her bring up the pool house.
So what are your plans with the pool house?
Well, I have plans to move in. I'll pay rent, it'll be a good experience for me, and it'll give me the privacy I need to study for my exams.
But surely you would rather live somewhere further away.
No, actually I would prefer to be nearby. I want independence, but not too much.
Well, what are you gonna do with the spare room?
Well, I had plans to move a friend in with me, who would also pay rent, and I definitely trust them. CB turns their head to my mum.
Don't you think it's a bit pathetic to let her live in your pool house? I mean, she could do with her own place that she pays full price for.
Well, yes, I suppose that's true, but we have no use for an empty pool house. We already have a spare bedroom. What would we even need it for?
Well, I could live there.
Now you could tell my mum was appalled by this, but she kept calm and asked her about it like she was considering it. Okay then, but what would you do for rent?
Wait, I would have to pay rent? But I'm your sister.
Okay then, well, CB, we already have agreements on the house, but we do have a spare room you can stay in for a few weeks till you get your own place. She goes flying off about how she's a terrible sister and she'll rot in hell for not helping family, and how I'm the worst out of all of us for not letting her own aunt have somewhere to stay, until eventually she goes out the door, slamming it behind her. Choosing beggars and people who are entitled in general will always try and make you feel bad for stuff that they want for free. They don't mind being a burden on you. They feel no guilt about it whatsoever, but they will make you feel guilty for not giving them everything that they want. Submit your story to be read on the channel at voiceyherestories@gmail.com and join our Voicey veteran community at r/VoiceyHere. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode. Alright, Voicey veterans, I'll see you in the next one.